Dobroveče, gledate emisiju Prva intervju, ja sam Anđela Šestović. Ove subote razgovaramo sa Nikolaosom Dimitriadisom, ekspertom za neuronauku sa Britanskog univerziteta Sheffield. Dimitriadis više od 15 godina proučava kako funkcioniše ljudski mozak. Njegovi savjeti za poslovanje uz primjenu naučnih saznanja o funkcionisanju nervnog sistema su veoma traženi u najjačim svjetskim kompanijama i korporacijama, pa će neka od svojih saznanja dijeliti i sa nama u narednih sat vremena. Dimitriadisa, pored ostalog, pitamo kakve posljedice po naš nervni sistem ostavljaju krize kakva je pandemija koronavirusa, koji je način da iz svega izađemo bez posljedica po mentalno zdravlje i kako da se naš mozak lakše nosi sa sličnim izazovima. Ostanite uz Prvu, vidimo se nakon reklama. Ponovo smo u studiju. Počinjemo razgovor sa Nikolaosom Dimitriadisom, ekspertom za neuronauku sa Britanskog univerziteta Sheffield. Mr. Dimitriadis, good afternoon. Thanks for being our guest.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. First, I would love to explain to the people who are watching us what neuroscience is.
So neuroscience is a relatively new science. It was only in the late 1960s where the American Neuroscience Association was formed. So it's a later science, and it's a combination of other sciences. It combines psychology, it combines biology, okay, and it combines, of course, neurology, medical science, and it combines all this to understand how the brain works and how the working of the brain impacts to our behavior. Okay, so neuroscience is about understanding human nature, actually.
Excellent, clear. So while I was reading your biography, I came across an interesting piece of information that you have studied more than 5,000 brains across 25 countries, which is impressive. What did you find out? How actually powerful our brain is?
So now it's around 5,500, I think, is even more. And I have been very lucky in my life to be able to work in something that I'm very passionate about. So what have we found with all these studies? Well, something that I kind of expected, because if you start studying the human brain, you understand something very interesting. The brain is where all the decisions are made and all our behavior comes from. Not our mind. Our mind is what you call you, I call Nikolaos, and I have an experience every day. And I think that the experience, this conscious experience I have every day, is what makes me, me. Well, neuroscience does not say this. Neuroscience says that the mind, or the conscious understanding and experience of myself, is just a small part of what the brain does. By studying all these 5,500 brains around the world, I found out that if I put an electroencephalogram on you, okay, a cup, and I measure your brain waves and which parts of the brain react to which stimulus, which images I give you, the image that your brain will like very much, and I will find the best reaction of your brain, will probably not be the same if I ask you personally. And I ask you, can you please tell me which image you like the most? And you say, image number 3. But then I check what the brain said, and the brain liked image number 7. So there is no always agreement or overlapping or transparency between what the brain does and what one part of the brain, which is you, and your brain and me, does. It's not the same thing.
How is it possible that our subconscious makes decision before we actually decide to make a decision? How we can make our subconscious to become our partner?
So these are excellent questions. There are more than one. And these are the questions that I try to find out with my research, with my business work, with my books and my articles. These are very important questions that science is discussing about, philosophy is discussing about, education is discussing about, business leadership and HR. They are very, very important questions going back to ancient times. Okay, so what is neuroscience telling us about these questions? First of all, indeed, you are very right. We do not make decisions consciously. Most of the decisions are unconscious, and we know how far before this decision is being taken, which is amazing. So in 1980s, beginning of 1980s, a neuroscientist called Benjamin Libet made one experiment that is considered one of the best experiments in neuroscience. He put in some people electroencephalogram and he asked them, can you choose between A or B, left and right, this part of the screen or this part of the screen, and just press a button and say, I decided. At the same time, he was measuring what was happening in the brain. What he found out is that he could see in the brain the decision being made 500 milliseconds, half of a second, up to 2.5 seconds before the person knew that he took a decision. Now, you might say 500 milliseconds, half a second, or it's too little, but it's not, because the brain works in hundreds, if not 1,000 times per second. So not only the brain decides before us, but we can actually measure how long before us. And now latest studies pushed it back to 11 seconds. So up to 11 seconds before you say, I want to decide, the brain already decided.
It's impressive. It's impressive.
Really amazing. It changed my life, when I started looking at this. But what does it mean that the brain decided? Because I think this is what most people find difficult to understand. The brain decides many times per second if it agrees with something and something that happened is for my benefit, so it's good for my well-being, to survive, to thrive, all these goals that the brain has, or not. So the brain, when we say the brain decides, the brain actually says, this is good for me, let's go for it. This is bad for me, let's avoid it. And actually, these are the two motivational systems that the brain has. Go for it, approach motivational system, or don't go for it, avoidance motivational system. And the brain decides hundreds of times per second, depending on what's happening around us, to switch on and off, or stronger the approach, stronger the avoidance. So when we say the brain decides, actually the brain decides the direction. That's good for me, that's bad for me. Okay, and then it comes to influence our behavior. So yes, before we know it, seconds after we know it, and we know exactly how many seconds, the brain makes a decision. And when we say the brain makes a decision, it means that it activates the good motivational network or the bad motivation. This is what we say.
It sounds like we actually don't have control over ourselves. I mean, brain has, but not in the same way like we used to think that we.
Bravo.
Is
this
it true?
Is the biggest, just to say that what you said now is the biggest revolution of our times. It's not digital, it's not social media and mobile phones. That's all techniques and very nice tools. The real scientific revolution is the fact that probably we are not in control of ourselves. And this is something we are not prepared to accept.
Is it true that our brain uses only few estimates of its capabilities, like we used to listen?
So no, that's not scientific and it's not correct. I don't know if you watched the movie Lucy by Luc Besson. It's a movie with Scarlett Johansson.
Yes.
That she increases, she took some illegal drugs and she increases the percentage that she uses. And when she reaches 100%, she becomes God, so that she becomes, she's everywhere and can change everything. And this is a fantasy. This is a wrong philosophical idea from the past. And it comes from our arrogant mind, because the mind doesn't want to accept that it doesn't have control. On the contrary, it wants to feel, it wants to believe that the more control the mind has, the more godlike we will become. It's so arrogant, eh? No. To say that we use the brain, let's say only 5 or 10% of our brain, it's like saying I'm using 10% of my arm, which is not possible. A healthy arm is fully used. Every muscle and every nerve and every bone has to work. Of course, I can use my arm better or more or less. But a healthy arm is used all the time, the components. The same with the brain. A healthy brain uses its components whenever it needs. Not all the time. It cannot use everything at the same time. It's not enough energy. But when the brain needs to use some part, it has access and is using it. So this 5 and 10% of the past has been proven wrong.
So actually we are using all parts of our brain, but not at the same time.
Exactly.
In special situations. You say that our brain has limited amount of energy, and that you say that our brain actually has less energy than our phone battery, right? Is it right? How it is possible?
Yes. So the energy for the brain is something very interesting to me, because maybe you've noticed that from my biography that I work with a lot of companies, leaders, managers, professionals, to help them use neuroscience to become better at their job. And one of the big secrets to improve yourself is to manage your brain energy. Now, the brain energy, which is actually the food of the brain, what the brain cells eat, it's either calculated in terms of oxygen, okay, or in terms of glucose, which is the basic fuel for the brain. And when the neurons, the main brain cells, talk, they are activated, they consume this energy. So they need, as when you are all day working and you haven't eaten anything, you will feel hungry, tired. You need to replace this energy. So just to give you an idea, the brain is only 2% of our body mass, but it consumes 20 to 25% of the total body food for the whole body. So only 2% of your body consumes 20 to 25% of the energy of the body. Okay, and this is why it's important to know how to prioritize things in life. Because, for example, if you wake up in the morning and you go to work, let's say it's Tuesday morning, and you have a very important meeting or a very important report or a very big situation, this will consume your food, because neurons will light up, will try to solve the situation, and will eat the food, and then you will not have enough energy to take right decisions or to behave in the right way. So, you go after Tuesday evening at home, you're nervous, you fight with your spouse, you kick the dog, you kick the kid, and because you don't have enough energy to control these urges. So it's very important to have enough food for our brain to be able to recognize what is good and what is bad in some situations, and to help our brain take the best decision.
What
Otherwise,
is food brain?
which...
Yes,
Bravo.
please.
So what is food of the brain? There are many ways by which you can retain or replace the energy of the brain. First of all is food. Okay, real food.
Like real food.
Real food. If you eat a lot of chocolate, for example, the brain energy has, because of glucose, it has a lot of spikes. Like you become very energetic, very, very powerful in your mind, but then you fall very fast because it is metabolized very, very fast. So you create artificial boosts, but then you need more. You need more. It's like you become addicted to it. Actually, we say to students, before you have an exam, eat some chocolate or some sweet. Okay, that's fine. But if you get used to this every day, you actually create more problems than the problems you solve. So a diet which is more normal, more harmonized during the day, to eat every type of food, but in the right quantities, and to make sure that before very important days, very important meetings, you have good energy in you to perform, is very important. But not only food. How else you can lose your energy more efficiently or use it more efficiently? Avoid toxic people. Toxic people, we call them energy vampires, can really take a lot of your energy very fast, because they ask you things, they attack you with things, they bother you with things that take part of the brain energy to understand, to compute and to respond, and then you don't have energy for the things you want to do. Okay, so be very careful who you sit around with. There are people that will consume the energy fast because they demand many things from you very fast. and other people that allow you to have a more autonomous and empowering mode. Nature, the third thing that I would say, it's nature. Nature replenishes very fast the energy in the brain. So why you think now offices have fish tanks, with fish that fish around, or a lot of greenery, or, taking a walk in the middle of the day. There was a study last year. It found out, if I remember correctly, you need around an hour and a half per week in nature for the brain to retain good energy. But you can do it every day, 10, 15 minutes. You don't have to do it all at once. But nature, because we evolved into nature, our brain is very connected with nature, also helps a lot with brain energy.
It makes a sense. We actually belong to
Exactly.
to the nature.
Exactly.
It often happens that we want to do something very hard, but we feel tired, or let's say to do something on Monday, but then Monday comes and nothing. Why is it so hard for ourselves to motivate? You say that there is something called brain motivation. How to motivate our brain?
Excellent question. And this is a very good example to understand the difference between the brain making a decision, which is the real motivation for action, and me making a decision, not my brain, me, which is in my mind very theoretical, very idea-based, but not action-based. And this is my main message to my students, to my colleagues, to my clients, and to your viewers. Real decisions that lead to action, which means to behavior, which means you to do something, which means me, Monday to start something, okay? This is a decision that the brain has to take. If you take it and your brain didn't take it, Monday will come and nothing will happen. Because the real motivation, the real parts of the brain that are more related, more pushing behavior, action, meaning me really moving in the real world, my muscles and my nerves and my the bones to move. It's has not been taken by the brain. You said I will do this on Monday, but that's a theoretical decision. It's not a brain decision.
How to make a
So
brain
it's
decision?
Okay, so this actually goes to what you asked me earlier. How can I become a partner to my brain? The first thing that you need to understand is know thyself. Okay, this again from ancient philosophers, very important statement. Many times we do things opposite to our brain because our mind, or it's a little bit more complicated. The brain has many parts, There is no, for example, logic and emotion. There's not only two parts. There's so many, there are more than 35 different systems. And every system has its own agenda. It wants to do something. For example, you have the reward system that wants always to have like pleasure, then you have the social awareness system that wants to comply with what people are doing. Okay. Then you have the logical one that wants something to be 1 + 1 + 1 to do it. So there is many different systems. There is the fear system that wants you to avoid threats and all this. So many systems, and each one has its own agenda. It's like a group of managers in a company, okay? And each one has their own politics, their own agenda, their own. So the first thing you need to do is that you need to start listening to your brain. And unfortunately, these deeper parts of the brain cannot talk. They cannot control the language part of the brain. So intuition is a very important internal communication system of the brain. Many people say brain or heart, like do what your heart says. That's not correct. The heart does almost nothing. It keeps you alive. It pumps blood. Fantastic. But the second organ in us that has a lot of neurons is actually our stomach. So stomach has around 500 million neurons. It's a very it's our second brain, is actually the stomach. And it has a very important nerve. It's called the vagus nerve that connects directly the stomach to the brain. So intuition, feeling that in your stomach that something is good or bad, it's an amazing information to start understanding. Is this good for me or bad for me? Now, I'm not saying that the brain might not take a wrong decision, definitely. But slowly we need to connect with this different. We need to observe ourselves, not only us to observe ourselves, but what I write on my first book is also ask the people around you and say, listen, how do I usually react when I'm afraid, because the mind does not have all the information. It has many ideas which are not true, many false opinions about myself, all these biases that we call. So sometimes asking other people how you react, it's an eye opener. It's really illuminating. Because you say, no, come on, I don't do this. And they say, yes, you did it then, and then. And then you start collecting information, how your brain decides, And then, of course, you can use all this information to make sure you achieve your life goals better.
You say that there is one part of brain that hates reality. Is it an explanation why some people around us bother us? Sometimes.
Yes, this is one of my favorite topics. There is a system in our brain. It's a perceptual system. So it's a system that allows our brain to get information from the outside world and from the inside world, make meaning, what does this mean, and then react to it. And there is this perceptual system, which is actually on your left hemisphere. So this is the part that is all this system, my left half of the brain, which loves control. The goal of this perceptual system is to make sure you survive because there is no unpleasant surprise. But the more you cannot control the environment, when we lived in caves and in jungles and in savannas, there were so many things we cannot control and die, like the weather, or like a very aggressive animal, a big animal. So all these were things we could not control. And look around the cities. We control the weather. You have an air conditioning. The whole year around, you can have the same weather. Okay. So, and this was actually amazing for our evolution and for where we are today as humankind. But this system hates reality and hates nature and hates other people because other people and nature cannot be fully predicted and controlled. Mm-hmm. So again, go back and think that the purpose of this system is to make sure that it completely understands what is happening now and in a little bit to predict, and understands all the different elements of the system. It's systematic thinking, systems thinking. This one will move and then we'll move that one like a machine. Then we'll move that one. And if everything moves, this will happen. And I can be 100% sure. Total control and predictability. And this makes it happy. But people are not like this. I mean, other people. It is out of my control. And this is why this part of the brain hates people and reality, because it cannot control them.
So what happens then in the crisis situation, like coronavirus pandemic is? How our brain behave in crisis?
Well, and it's a very, very timely question. It's a very important question for our times. When predictability falls, and this part of the brain that likes predictability is getting a little bit panicked, we start to have some specific emotional reactions. Fear, and anxiety. These are two different things, fear and anxiety. And what actually happens in the brain is that since the brain cannot predict what will happen tomorrow, or it predicts something negative, I will lose my job, my grandparents will die, my kid is not going to school and and so my kid will not learn the skills. So if it predicts, either it cannot predict or it can predict negative outcomes, it starts creating this, activating the fear mechanism. And the fear mechanism is very natural, it's very normal. Actually, if you don't feel fear this period of time, something is wrong with you. So it's very natural, very healthy. I'm very big supporter of negative emotions. Okay, negative emotions exist for a reason. It's great. So you should not eliminate your negative emotions. You will move to other territories. So first of all, fear. What is fear? Fear is that something is happening that will hit me. It will create me pain, and I don't know how to react. Okay. So for example, when you go out from your home in the morning and all of a sudden you see maybe a bike coming towards to hit you, fear mechanism in the brain has specific parts of the brain. It will activate in order to move you away so this does not hit you. But when the bike doesn't hit you, and of course you are a little bit excited that this happened, fear will leave, right? You don't have, so fear is specific to a danger. When danger is not there, fear doesn't need to be there. Anxiety is different. Anxiety is when you feel fear without having to feel fear. So even when you go out of your home and there is no bike to hit you, you feel like threat bike will hit me, then you have anxiety. And this is the problem. My advice to people is to feel fear is very normal, is very natural, is the healthy reaction of the brain to prepare you not to be hit by the car, not to lose your job, not for your kid. So understanding your fear, you remember what we talked before, listening to yourself, experiencing fear, but being brave and making all the actions to eliminate the effect of the danger. Okay. For example, if you are afraid that your kid is not learning many things because they don't go to school because of Corona, hire some extra help, spend more time with your kid. So do the action and the fear will leave you. But if you do not do this, if you do not accept your fear and you do not listen to your fear to react, then the fear will become anxiety. And a little bit of anxiety is normal. But when anxiety is high, then fear became the normal way of your brain to react to anybody. So even when there is no danger, even when you don't have to lose your job, you will have constant extreme and high stress that will lead to what we call an anxiety disorder. And that's the biggest problem of our time. To have unpredictability and negativity, it's normal. We all have it. To feel fear, so fear to be your motivation to react and correct things, fantastic, bravo, it's the normal thing to do. But if you don't do this and you either play it like you don't care, or you hide it, or you push it down, then it will become worse, it will become anxiety, and anxiety will stay there for a longer time. So nice to feel fear, and nice to react.
It's like a positive emotion sometimes, and anxiety is negative. But it's almost impossible to not feel anxiety during the pandemic. We are expanded to all, we are exposed to all numerous informations about deaths, about number of infected people. How to stay strong, let's say like that.
And thank you so much for this question. Yes, thank you so much for this question, because since March, the number one training and seminar I'm giving around the world is exactly what you asked now. And there are some specific actions to protect your brain from the crisis, or let's say to feel it more in a more healthy way. So even if fear, it is a negative emotion, it can have positive outcome. And even a little bit of anxiety, normal anxiety, is okay. But when anxiety becomes strong enough to stop you from taking positive actions, then we know it causes harm. Okay? It doesn't allow you, it doesn't help you to achieve your life goals. On the contrary, it stops you for achieving the. So what are these actions that you can do? Okay, so number one is create habits. The brain operates much better in a procedural, in a ritualistic way. There was a very nice study. They took two groups of people and they gave them one activity, to finish some activity. But one group of people was taught to do the activity as a process, as a ritual. First this, the other was left not to do it. Different time they were doing the activity different way. Regardless of if they managed to finish the activity correctly or not, so regardless if you win or lose, if you succeed or fail, the people that were doing the activity as a process, as a ritual, and they developed a habit on it, even when they were losing, when they were failing, their brain did not feel much stress because it had a trust on the process. While the people that every day were doing it differently without a specific process, regardless if they win or lose, their brain developed much more anxiety. So developing either top down, you impose it, or bottom up, you see what's happening and you are adapt, is very important for people to develop this kind of new normal procedures in their life. Rituals, how you wake up in the morning, how you make your coffee, how you talk to your kids, how you do your work. For example, with my family, we put Friday night pizza night, or Saturday with my daughter a Harry Potter movie. We started to create some stability, some normality, and that's the first one. Okay, the second one is connectivity. We are social creatures. I'm a big fan of what is called the social brain theory. Okay, so we are extremely social beings. And connecting with people is very important, even in lockdown. What does it mean? Go through your phone and find people that you haven't talked for a long time, friends, family, because you were too busy, and start calling them. Again, create a habit. Every Tuesday night, I will call a friend that I haven't talked to for a long time. We have, Zoom, Skype. We're very lucky in this crisis to have these online tools. Create a habit. I was talking to a company in US, in California, and what we did is that after the normal, work online, in the afternoon, we were leaving on the Zoom room, so people can come and have a drink and talk naturally and normally and friendly. So create opportunities to connect, even from far away. Okay. The third thing that I would say, and is one of my favorites, is that humor is an excellent way to keep the brain full of energy. You know how many funny memes are around because of the crisis and all this. Allow yourself the possibility to laugh, to take things lightly, to watch comedies, because I see people watch a lot of scary movies and thriller series, and okay, that's fine. But watch stand-up comedians. Watch the movies from your childhood that really made you feel good and great and empowered and to laugh. That's very important. Choose these things, okay? And the last one, which will look paradox from the previous, is to accept that death exists. We live in a period, especially just before the pandemic, but a longer period of, I would say, 20 years, 30 years in Western societies, where we prioritize pleasure and hedonism and me, and I want everything now. All this create a very egotistic attitude for the brain, mindset, which if you don't have it, you get depressed or you get stressed. We need to understand that it's tragedy that gives meaning to life. It's tragedy that makes us feel, cherish the relationships we have, give value to the normal family or friend life we have, to give value to our lives. The more you feel that everything is for you and you deserve everything and everything is satisfaction now and all this, then you will always ask for more. Nothing will satisfy you. And there is a lot of philosophers and neuroscientists that in this crisis urge people to rediscover our own mortality. Okay. In general, I would say that being very mindful and very careful and empathizing with the people that lost their loved ones, lost their jobs, we have to be close to these people. I have to say though something. The brain works with great innovation and creativity when it is under stress, not when it is happy. We have a lot of neuroscience experiments showing that when the brain is stressed and in fear, and it's especially, I will say this, what is the emotion which is the most correlated with creative thinking and innovation? It's frustration, extreme dissatisfaction. It's hating something that will push the brain while you sleep to spend energy and say, let me find the solution. Then you wake up and say, yes, that's the solution. Intuition. Eh? So I believe that this crisis gives also an opportunity for our brains to maybe solve old problems or solve new problems in new ways because we need it. Not because it is good to do so, because we have to do so. And the brain reacts amazingly when it has to do things. Okay.
Yes, but you say that crises are the new normal. What does it mean that more new crises will come, right? And that new crisis, new normal, requires new mindset.
My professional career, which started almost 25 years ago, I had the chance, like the whole world, to experience many crises. It was in the late 90s, it was the financial crisis of the Asian tigers, and as also Russia, big financial crisis. Then we had, of course, the dot-com crisis, where the stock market collapsed because of web companies that didn't do anything. Then we had the September 11th that created. Then we had many regional problems, some pandemics, SARS, MARS, all this. Then we had the big financial crisis of 2008. And then this decade as well, some regional problems, conflicts. We started having, it's called in politics, devolution. So instead of countries coming together and creating international bodies, we are breaking up. You see, the UK, we have Brexit. So 1st of January, UK leaves the EU, which is completely the opposite of the trend we had after the Second World War. Because after the Second World War, we had evolution, political evolution, countries coming together and creating these big bodies of collaboration and living together. Now we see, the opposite. So many things happen every time, which killed, and I think it was good that it killed, my rosy view of the world. So I don't think anymore, because of globalization, because of these problems that appear somewhere and can circulate around the world, I don't think that anymore we can believe that there will be some crisis, it will affect us a little bit, and then we will have many years of prosperity, quiet life, positive life, and then after 10 years, another crisis of 1 year. And then again, big period of fantastic growth and kumbaya and hallelujah. And all. I think this is not anymore the case. I think that our lives will be periods of constant crisis and constant opportunities to do great. Now, not all the crises will be the same, of course. Not all the crises are as big. Some will be big, some will be financial, some will be tech crisis, some will be humanitarian crisis, some will be political crisis. It doesn't matter. Some will be global, some will be more regional. But we will be constantly in a much more volatile period. And this is why we need to start preparing for living in such a world. So the model you referred about, I was playing around with some ideas and I created this kind of acronym. But in essence, I said we need to develop some core skills. These core skills are things like empathy. There are things like synergy, the fact that we need to collaborate. There are things like resilience. The fact that, you know what resilience, and I do with my company a lot of neuro studies for resilience. I put you the cup, electroencephalogram cup, I get you stressed, and then I see how fast you come back. And then we see your resilience. And resilience is very important. Resilience is not ignoring the crisis. Don't say, I don't care about it. Resilience is being hit, feeling bad, and then coming back to your normal self to fight back. These are very, very important new skills for people, for the future. So, and we need to go to the schools, work with teachers, with students, with universities, with companies, with NGOs, with governments, to make sure that these new basic skills of humankind are here in order for us to survive in a constant crisis period.
Mr. Dimitriadis, all these new measures we have, like social, physical distancing, wearing masks, we have a ban on touching, hugging, kissing each other. How all of it affect our brain? Is it like a stress situation for our brain? And how will we easily go back to all these habits after this coronavirus crisis?
I think that we will go back very fast, as soon as this finishes.
How hard is it for our brain to avoid all these things we used to?
The brain is very easy to go back to good times. The problem of the brain is going into the bad times. So, of course, we evaluate the times we live based on our lives. But if we step back and we see a little bit longer periods of time, you will see that, we had world wars. We had other big pandemics in the world. And things came, I didn't know much of these things, but now with this crisis, with this pandemic, we all got more informed about, the Spanish flu that killed so many million. And you will see people with masks, not hugging, not kissing. This came back immediately because some of these things have to do with human evolution. We call it human universals. Why we call them human universals? Because they don't depend on culture or on where you live or when you lived, now or 1,000 years ago. There are some human constants that has to do with biology and evolution. And hugging, kissing, being close to each other are very important parts of what make us human. And when we decrease this, there are consequences. So I think we will come back. Now, how fast we will come back, or if we come back to all of them, I don't want to make these kind of predictions.
Yeah.
I'm not a fortune teller. But the basic things that makes us human, and especially the ones that are embedded in our everyday lives, and we enjoyed them, will come back immediately. Your brain is fantastic in remembering what you enjoyed. There's no, or what benefits you got. It will come back immediately. Now, some of the things will remain, but these things that will remain will be more top-down. We will impose them. Like, for example, many companies are planning to keep teleworking, working from home, more even when the crisis is finished, which creates another question. Are we ready to deal with the well-being crisis of working from home all the time? We already know it. There is this what we call Zoom fatigue. The fact that people that work all day in front of a laptop, meaning talking to people, having meetings, their brain energy is consumed faster. So they need to find ways they're getting more aggressive, more confrontational. They lose purpose in life. So that this is why we have a very innovative brain. We need to see the situation every time and being creative enough and innovative enough to find new solutions to new problems.
Mr. Dimitriadis, we are going on set of advertisement and we will continue our conversation. Stay with us. Ponovo smo u studiju. Naš gost, da podsjetimo, Nikolaos Dimitriadis, profesor sa Britanskog univerziteta Sheffield. Mr. Dimitriadis, how do the technologies we have today shape human brain? Like smartphones, computers, then we have also social networks. How much all of it changes people?
This is a very important topic lately that acquired a lot of publicity because of a Netflix documentary called The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you watched it or if your audience has watched it, but I really recommend that you watch this documentary. It's made by a person called Tristan Harris, which I follow for a long time now, that used to work in Google as an ethicist, so the ethical side of Google. And what Tristan Harris and many others from Silicon Valley and from the beginning of the new type of companies and the apps that we use every day say is that these apps, these social media, were developed from the very beginning, and if not from the very beginning, they became very fast addiction devices, addiction programs. Because it was very important for them in their development process to attract investors, to show that more and more people was using it, and the people that were using it more and more stayed and engaged in their platform. So it's very important for one social medium for you not to change to another one, but to use as much as you can this one. But in order for you to stay, they utilized, they took advantage of many of the things of how our brain works, what our brain notices, what motivates very, very strongly our brain to engage. I'll give you an example. You remember I told you about frustration, that frustration is an emotion that leads to creativity.
Like fuel
yes,
for our brain.
Yes. Fuel, bravo. Anger has been found that it is the #1 motivation for you to engage with social media. Anger. So they need to make you angry. They need to engage you more and more in tribes, in groups of people that believe the same thing and are enemies to another group of people. So the more your group of people hates the other group of people, the more you will stay to fight, to discuss, to see, to get angry, not to sleep at night and wake 3 o'clock in the morning and, reply to somebody that told you something. So they understood this vulnerability of the human brain, and they took advantage of it without regulation. And, I think for many years now, actually, this is the topic of my speech in Montenegro when I was there last year in Podgorica for an event, is that this happened in the past as well. The tobacco industry, cigarettes, they were advertising that it's good for pregnant women and that it's doctors are smoking, it's good for health. But then when we understood what was happening, the whole world came in very strong and said regulation. Now, social media is very new. For how long do we have social media? I think Facebook, it was 2005 or 2005, 4 or 5, right? So it's a very new phenomenon. And we are still not sure. There's a lot of economic growth, so nobody wants to touch them very much because they have a lot of political power now. You know, they can. There was even a research finding out that Facebook can change few percentages in elections, the opinion, depending on what it tells. So
Do you
it's
think
new.
Yeah, please
It's
continue.
new. It's complicated things. It's new. It's complex. But now we have enough data, and enough research to know it promotes narcissism. So me. You know, changes the pictures all the time. It promotes depression in many cases, isolation, anger, antisocial behavior. And that's amazing. For me, social media have the most fake but brilliant brand name. They're called social media, and actually we know that they are quite antisocial for some,
Like
for many of
paradox.
the things. Yes, it's a paradox. Exactly. So they really and they introduced features to make you more hooked and more addicted. And that's, I think, like with smoking, we have to go in and see something. Now, it's not all bad. There was one research a few days ago that showed that people that post events, they feel better and they remember these events more, which is fantastic. So there are some good things that can come. And another study, which I posted few days ago, it showed that the worst thing that you can do with your social media is this, what is called passive scroll down. So when you do this passive scroll, your brain compares the nice pictures of other people's lives to your life, and it makes you depressed. But when you engage, when you post, or most importantly, what's the study found? If you use social media to boost real social behavior, so when you arrange with your friends to talk, to meet, to discuss, when you use it to create a conversation with your friend, then you have good impact of social media. But this passive, like a hamster in the, you know, in the
So we have
round.
to use it smart, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, and what we can expect from the further development of technologies?
I belong to this group of people globally that we don't believe artificial intelligence will look like a brain even for the next 100 years, because we don't fully understand the brain. So I think artificial intelligence and technology is fantastic in some aspects of how the brain works, but not in what is called general intelligence. General intelligence is our brain does everything at the same time. Amazing. So you might be drinking a coffee, looking at the news, thinking about the problem in your work in the backstage, and keeping an eye on your child doing something. This general intelligence is something that machines will find it very difficult to develop, if ever. Okay, I don't want to say never, but so what is more technology is focusing in one thing, not in all this general, because as I said, we're not even sure how our brain achieves all this complex thinking and behavior. So yes, I'm for artificial intelligence. It can help us solve many problems, medical and other problems in life. But to say that it will reach human intelligence level, general, so overall integrative, I think this is. I'm not sure how many generations will have to pass for that. I'll give you an example. You know that neurons are cells. You know, it's a cell. It's a living organism, actually. It's a very small, tiny living organism. In technology and in artificial intelligence, we consider neurons as a cell that does mechanic things. You know, like if you give me some information, I will keep it or I will give it. This is what is called a neuron to fire. It fires or it's not firing. If it fires, for example, it's 1. If it doesn't fire, it's 0. And this is what is called a binary system. You know, digital technology. This is digital. 1 1 0 1 1 1. Okay. So a lot of artificial intelligence and talk about a node, a piece on the network that, depending on how much information we get, will either open or close. But now we understand that it's not so simple. that the neurons have their own decision-making agenda, which we don't know. So not only a neuron decides quantitatively how much electricity, energy will receive from other neurons in order to get excited, to fire or not, but it has its own agenda, which probably comes through millions of years of evolution that we don't understand. So there are these kind of amazing problems that I'm not sure even close we are to solve. But I support AI. I believe in AI. I'm using AI. Okay, just
Yes.
we should not fantasize about what it can achieve.
Mr. Dimitriadis, you say that today's school lack passion, that they are not making, not creating leaders, but secretaries, right? Why
Right.
do you think so, and where do we go wrong?
So you remember when I was talking about the Industrial Revolution era, where there are two possible explanations why we have the schooling system that we have today, which is called Victorian. It's from the Victorian times in the UK. One is because the British Empire was expanding and it needed secretaries. So it needed office workers all around the world. And the second thing is because of Industrial Revolution, we needed workers in factories. And before that, we had farmers. And a farmer is a very different person. A farmer has some periods, especially in the West, you have very intense some periods. You have to put the seeds inside to cultivate. But then you wait for a couple of months before the crops, and then you have more work. So it's a very, very different lifestyle and rhythm of style and demands, etc. And they needed to take them and to make them parts of the machine. How do you have a machine and you have to make sure that the machine works? The same with humans. Why do you think we call them human resource? Because it's another resource, like we have financial resources and IT resources, and real estate resources. So we made humans as part of the system, of the machine. But I think that this is killing empathy, it's killing innovation, it's killing real teamwork, because we now know that passion, creativity, empathy, teamwork, all these wonderful things, they don't happen when you sit in a room in school, in one desk. You only sit in one desk for the whole year, and you only answer yes or no or something else. You learn what the teacher will say. The teacher has absolute authority, or the book, it doesn't matter. There is no flexibility for you to contribute, zero flexibility, and you are marked individually. So what I will do in school, I will get my personal mark. What does this teach you? What all this teach my brain? You should only care about yourself. What do we say in school? Don't look on the side. You answer this. So it's only me, what I will make, no real relation to anybody else. There is no empowerment to contribute. It's either you learned the definition or the mathematical and you did it correctly or not. And this is it. And everything is completely stable and bolted down and unmovable. You cannot move the world. You can only obey what the teacher says. And who are the best students? The ones that obey the best. Okay. So this environment teaches the brain to develop this attitude in life. Okay. No initiative, proactive. And this is why now experimental schools around the world, they teach empathy. They teach responsibility in the terms that there's an experimental school in the US where there is not even a program. There's no program. The students decide if they will do mathematics today, etc., etc. So there is so much flexibility, of course, and there is no teacher. There is mentor. Okay, I will go back in ancient times. What do you think that Plato's Academy, Aristotle's Lyceum, or Epictetus' Garden, they didn't have these things. They had the personal relationship between the mentor and the mentee. This relationship is paramount. Apprentices, as we call them apprentices, paramount in learning. Not only, and this is the key thing, not only learning knowledge and skills, but learning how to live your life. Because if I ask you, who taught you how to decide? What would you tell me? Who told you how to make decisions in life? What is good? What is bad? What is productive? What is not? Who teaches values in life? Is it school? Is it family? Is it government?
Or maybe
Is it
friends?
or French or religion? But in ancient times, both in the Greek and the Roman world, and in Eastern philosophies, you learn this within, a very personal relation of learning and teaching and developing yourself. And we miss this. You go to school to learn techniques, then you go to university to learn the profession, and then you go to do this profession to make money. And then you're a fantastic person in society. You make money, you pay your taxes, and that's it. But I think that's not the purpose of life. Was the main purpose.
Mr. Dimitriadis, it was a pleasure to talk with you. We learned a lot of things. First of all, to take care of our brain, and our brain will take care of us, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Poštovani gledalci, bio je to Nikolaos Dimitriadis, profesor i ekspert za neuronauku sa Britanskog univerziteta Sheffield. Hvala što ste bili uz nas. Laku noć.